Good evening, everyone. I'd like to get started. Can everyone hear me in the back? Okay. My name is Ernest Rodriguez-Naz, and I'm the Development Officer here at the University of New Mexico Anderson School of Management. I'd like to thank all of you for being here tonight. I'd also like to thank our guest speaker, Michael Gallegos, who's coming all the way from San Diego to give our talk today. And while I realize he comes to Albuquerque a fair amount, we owe him a debt of gratitude for coming tonight just to give our talk. Thank you. I'd like to just take a minute to recognize the Anderson School of Management Foundation Board. We have many foundation board members here. Our National Advisory Board member, many of those folks are here. I can ask those folks to just stand up for a minute so some of you folks can know who they are. Great, thank you. Without their support, folks, we could not do the kind of programming that we do here. A lot of work goes into pulling off an event like what we're doing here tonight. I'd like to thank our staff, our faculty, our students. We have students here in the audience. Thank you for being here. And yes, have a seat. You'll be happy to know that we've just received an overwhelming response to tonight's event. So do not be surprised if we have people sort of coming in throughout the presentation. We will ask them to be very quiet, but just so that you have a heads up. In any case, let me take a minute now to introduce our professor, Sol Casasilla. Professor Casasilla is the chair, the endowed chair for economic development here at Anderson. He's one of our longest serving faculty members. He teaches the management and technology program among other faculty. He does many things here, including he spearheads our technology business plan competition, which just took place last week. So if you folks will join me in welcoming Sol Casasilla.
Thanks, Ernest. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to introduce our guest speaker today, Mr. Michael Gallegos. Michael is a good friend of New Mexico, the University of New Mexico, and our UNM business plan competition. We were here last 2 weeks ago, where we had 10 teams compete in a business plan competition, and Mr. Gallegos is the donor of the first prize for the last 3 years of that competition. And we are very grateful for him to do that. I said I'm going to introduce Michael, but from judging from the number of people that he hugged in this room, I don't think I really need to do much of an introduction. It seems that he knows everyone here and everyone knows him. But just for the benefit of our students and the benefit of some of the audience members that have not seen his resume, I'm just going to say a few things about him, and I'm sure he will tell you a little bit more about his entrepreneurial passion. Michael is a native New Mexican, and he is a graduate of the University of New Mexico. He was honored in 2004 as the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year. And the reason for that is, and I'm going to read this because there's a lot of numbers here. He created the nation's 5th largest and fastest growing independent hotel management company, and also the nation's 12th largest hotel ownership company with a portfolio of $2.2 billion, that's with a B. The company owns 45 hotels, some of which are in Albuquerque, and I'm sure Mr. Gallegos is going to tell you some about the properties in Albuquerque, the Wyndham, the DoubleTree, and others. These 45 hotels and resorts are from coast to coast, and I know, he always tells me about Le Méridien and Cancun. He says, everybody must go to Le Méridien and Cancun, so I know he owns that property. He has 13,550 rooms, 5,500 employees, and the company generates $400 million in annual revenues. Please help me help the Anderson School in welcoming Mr. Michael Gallegos.
I have 2 of these devices I'm supposed to wear, so let me get them going.
prefer that? Do you prefer this?
No, this is fine. I just need to get all put together here. If I sweat, I'm going to be electrocuted. So I hope someone has been trained in CPR. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of your busy lives to be here. I'm humbled that I've been asked to speak to all of you tonight, share my story with you. I'm also especially humbled when I look across the room and I see all of the faces that had so much to do with where I'm at today. If I started giving acknowledgments, I would probably take up my entire time slot, because so many of you have invested in me, so many of you have believed in me, and I see all of these great friends. And so before I get started, I need to thank all of you for all of your support throughout my entire life, because I have so many people that have been with me that are here today since day one, and went to grade school with me and were supportive of me, high school and were supportive of me, college, and in business. So I'd like to have all of you receive a round of applause, because all of you contributed to the success that American Property is today. Thank you. I'm only going to spend a couple of minutes giving you a little bit deeper background and history. I was born and raised in Las Vegas, New Mexico. And at the time it was 13,000 people, but we really lived in a city of 6,500 or so, because we never crossed the Gallegos Bridge into West Las Vegas. I went to East Las Vegas. If you did, God help you. And as all of you know, Las Vegas is a relatively poor community. So we never felt like we were impoverished, because everyone else was as well. The only time we felt poor in my family is when we had this one cousin who came from Denver. And he looked around, and in a snobby way he said, "Damn, you're poor." And all this time we thought we were just fine. I grew up in a family of 13. And I was in the lower middle, as I like to say. And my story is very much one of my family's story, because they have been doing the same thing I've been doing since day one. When you grow up in a large family dynamic, it actually prepares you to run a large company, because you understand immediately the value of individual sacrifice. I guess I should not turn this way. Individual sacrifice for the better of the family unit. It's always been one for all for one. And no one person could dominate, because that would take away from everyone else having the ability to shine and to rise as well. I had a lot of ambition since day one. And I'm going to wait just a few minutes, because I see some good friends that would like to come on in. You see, I still have those same traits. I want everyone to be included. And I'll tell a quick side story. When we have parties in my family, whether they're birthday parties or weddings or anniversaries, nothing is small. There are always 90 of us, or 100, or 150, or 400, depending on the event. So it's still that same mentality of inclusion and not exclusion. Thank you for coming. So, I was very aggressive, very ambitious, day one. I was just searching for the right outlet. As a lot of young boys, I thought I was going to be a professional baseball player because I was good in Little League and I was good in Senior League, but I did not have the size and I did not really have the skill to be a professional baseball player. So that was my first wake-up call. My first experience other than athletics in leadership was I was blessed to become the student body president of Memorial Middle School in Las Vegas. And we have people in this room who voted for me. And they continued to vote for me, and throughout high school I was president of my class, freshman class, sophomore class, junior class at Robertson High School. I refused to let that position go, I guess. I then transferred the middle of my junior year to St. Michael's High School in Santa Fe. I transferred for a variety of reasons. Primarily, I had to further my ambition of running La Fonda Hotel. So I had started working when I was 11 years old at La Fonda. My mom, who was a controller, which means the head accountant at that hotel, used to take me with her to that hotel since I was 4 or 5 years old. And I'd count change, put them in rolls, change out the stamp machine, the Coke machine, whatever she needed help doing. And when there was nothing for me to do, I'd wander the halls of the hotel. I was a hotel brat. And I used to see as a young boy what housekeepers did, what maintenance technicians did, and what maintenance technicians did with housekeepers. And I got to see all because no one paid attention to a young boy. But I started taking mental notes back then and started understanding everyone's job, everyone's assignment. Finally, when I was 11, I wanted to make some money the way my older brothers and sisters had been making money since they were 11 and 12. So my story is really not unique. All of my older brothers and sisters started working at a very early age, and they worked to support the family, because virtually any money we made went back to the family. And once again, it was all for one, one for all. So I approached the owner of the hotel, and he was one of my first mentors in business, Sam Ballin. Very famous guy in Santa Fe who's no longer with us, unfortunately. And I asked Mr. Ballin if I could have a job without letting my mom know that I was going to do this. And Mr. Ballin kept saying no to me day after day. And he finally got serious with me and said, listen, you're 11 years old. I have no job for you. We have child labor laws in this country. I could not put you on the payroll. So he thought that was it, and I quickly retorted, I'll work for tips only. He said, well, that's fine, but I still have no job for you. I said, I could do the parking lot attendant job. And he said, I have a parking lot attendant. I said, well, Joe's always drunk, hungover, and asleep. And Mr. Ballin paused, looked at me, and said, let's cut a deal. If we go to that parking lot booth now, and Joe's hungover, drunk, and asleep, you have the job. If not, you have to leave me alone until you're 16. I said, deal. We shook on it. And Mr. Ballin's a man of his word. So, marched outside, went down to the parking lot, and in this little booth, he became a good friend of mine, by the way. I hired him later on. Joe was drunk, hungover, and asleep. Snoring, in fact. Mr. Ballin was infuriated, and the parking lot booth had tinted glass, so you did not know he was drunk, hungover, and asleep unless you banged on the door and you're saying, wake up. Well, Joe got fired. Mr. Ballin said, get in there until I can find a replacement for you. I said, no problem. So I'm going to try to make this part of the story go faster. I was not supposed to park cars. Well, right now I'm not that tall to begin with, but back then at 11, I was around. So I could not see over the steering wheel, but I quickly learned that if you do not park cars, you do not make tips. So when guests would come with their keys, they'd go to hand them to me and then pull back, and I'd quickly say, I'm the assistant parking lot attendant. I'll hand your keys to the parking lot attendant. He's parking the car. Here's your claim check. Confidence game right away. You have to play it. So as soon as they turned the corner, I would get in the car, start it. Here's the steering wheel. I could not see over it. I'd put the car in gear, pop up to see where I was going, hit the brakes, pop back up, and I knew that was going to happen. And so I kept doing that until I parked the car. I never wrecked a car. I blew out a couple of clutches because that was an entirely new dimension for an 11-year-old. And there were a lot of cars that had clutches in those days. So I always replaced the clutches and with my money. That day I worked from 8 a.m. till around midnight. I made $185, all cash. And I'm not afraid to say it now because the statute of limitations is over. Mr. Ballin totally forgot about me because I did my job. And I was the last thing on his mind. He had a lot more important things. So every day I came to work at 7 that summer in the morning and worked till 11. So I worked 16 hours a day. And I kept making $165 to $185. Most of the money went back to my family for food, for expenses, but I also started dressing for success. By 3 weeks, I was the best dressed parking lot attendant in Santa Fe. I had a little vest on, I had a tie, I'd run to the cars the way they do in Vegas, and they make a lot of money too. I kept working at La Fonda continuously, all the way through junior high, high school. When I was 16, I was the front desk manager. When I was 17, I was the assistant general manager. And upon graduating from high school, I was the acting general manager and ran La Fonda every time Sam Ballin fired a manager. So to this date, I'm the youngest general manager of a 4-star hotel in the history of this country. So I kept working at La Fonda while I was making my way through the University of New Mexico, taking very few hours, trying to take 9 hours, 12 hours sometimes, working full time, making money. Finally, I resigned my 12-year career at 23 from La Fonda when I got elected student body president at the University of New Mexico. And once again, it was about ambition. And I just have to do this. One of my very dear friends and mentors is here, and I cannot go throughout the night without giving him the acknowledgement now that I mentioned student body president, Mr. Henry Ottomil, the former president of the Board of Regents. The year before I was student body president, I was the lobbyist for the students, and that man in the corner, Tom Rutherford, had no reason to treat this young student with respect, dignity, encouragement, guidance, but State Senator Tom Rutherford at the time did all that and more for me. So Tom, would you please stand up? And I'm going to try to resist this temptation because, as I said, I will go all night acknowledging all the people that had so much to do with me. I finally moved out of New Mexico at the completion of my term as student body president. I was elected president of the American Student Association in Washington, D.C. I was president of all the student body presidents. We represented 6 million students. I lived in Georgetown, testified on Capitol Hill, testified before the presidency, the executive branch. We got past the first nationally sponsored work-study program that created tens of thousands of jobs every year for students up until this year. So we were very proud of that success. When I came back to New Mexico, I joined my older brother's architectural engineering firm, and still went to school part-time, still trying to get my degree. I had no experience in architectural engineering, but he thought I was a pretty good salesman. And he also wanted to grow the business from a hotel standpoint. And so we started out with 3 guys in his garage and a couple of drafting tables. 6 years later, we had 85 professionals. We're one of the Southwest's largest professional architectural, engineering, construction management firms. And we specialized in a lot of facility design, including hotels. We designed 7 Marriotts, 5 Sheratons, 2 Intercontinentals, and renovated a bunch house. So now I had a unique set of experiences working virtually every position in a hotel, designing, constructing hotels. I got to learn about it. With a partner, we saved our money and we bought the Comfort Inn on Central Avenue. It was out of bankruptcy from the Bank of New York. We turned that property around, a lot of partners' involvement, with just friends and family money, and that year it returned 85% annual cash on cash. So if you invested $100,000, you would have gotten $85,000 back. And it kept doing that year after year. We stored our money and bought another hotel out of bankruptcy, the Las Cruces Hilton from the Bank of Montreal. And that returned an average of 35 to 65% cash on cash return annually. We stored our money. We did not increase our lifestyle. And we invested in another hotel. So now I feel like I've laid some groundwork, I'm going to delve into the challenges we've had in growing that company. You now know the genesis of how it all started. We have faced monumental hurdles in growing American Property Management Corp. How did we come up with the name? I'm not too sure. Jim Long had already established American Property Consultants and Appraisers and ad valorem tax consultants. So we played off the American Property name, and we knew we were going to be a management company. So I guess we did it that way, American Property Management Corp. So why did we grow the company? Raw ambition. And that's how I started this conversation with you. I was ambitious from the get-go. And we had been successful on 1 hotel, 2 hotels, 3 hotels. We thought we could continue doing this. There was greed involved. Greed in the sense that we wanted to make money. Jim grew up in a very challenging environment. And like me, we were running from what we perceived was poverty around the corner. Every day, we did not feel successful. Every day, we thought we had to continue working hard and being more successful to avoid being poor. Still to this day, I say I run from poverty. That's imprinted. We also wanted to test our capabilities. We wanted to see where our limits were. And And this was very important to me. I had a strong sense of obligation for those core group of people around me, most of them family members, to grow the company so they would have opportunity to advance, so they could make more money. Because honestly, in the early days, we asked everyone to sacrifice for this cause. One for all for one. And they did. I was paying my brothers very little money to help me at the onset. And that helped us, since we all made very little money, that helped launch us to be successful. So I had an obligation, a commitment to grow the company, to help those around me. But growing a company is riddled with trapdoors, potholes. There are a lot of factors that come into play. The market conditions have to be right. You have to strike while the iron is hot. I'm sorry to use that old cliche. Meaning your particular industry has to be on the upswing, because all real estate is very cyclical. It goes in anywhere from 6 to 10-year cycles. It's almost predictable. And you have to catch it on the right cycle. So then you have to have the stars aligning for you. So the market condition has to be right, and then you have to have the cash to do something about it. And as I said, I was blessed to have good partners, and we were smart. We saved our cash. That way we could strike on this uptick of the hotel industry. You need a banker. In our early days, we had no track record. We had the most difficult time finding a banker who would believe in us. We got lucky. And I keep saying I'm blessed. We found this young, ambitious, smart, incredible banker who was working for United New Mexico Bank at the time, before it became Norwest and before it became Wells Fargo. And she remembered me from the University of New Mexico, and she believed in me. Without this banker's support, I would not be here today, because she believed in us and believed in me and my story and what we were doing, to the point that she used to go to committee and get knocked around and go back to committee and force us through until we got our loan approved. Michelle Coons, please stand up. I'd pass by the bank Sunday evening. Sunday morning, there was Michelle's car working on our loan application. Late at night, Sunday evening, her light's the only light on. 8, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. I felt so guilty, but grateful. She was still working on preparing our loan application. So without having a banker's support, you're just out of luck. And we worked with several banks later on, but they all came after Michelle. And we still work with Michelle to this date. She left Wells Fargo as the Vice President of Commercial Lending, and now she's overseeing the Southwest Division for Bank of the West. So this ambitious young banker has done tremendous and built a great career. So we're very proud of her as well. Another component, remember, first of all, you had to have market timing. Then you had to have cash. Then you had to have a banker. Then you have to have the infrastructure. All of these things have to be in alignment at the right time in order to strike and build a company. And if one of them is not there, you're not growing. You're not building a company. A lot of times I felt like we threaded the eye of a very fine needle. I understand why a lot of businesses are not successful. I understand why a lot of talented, smart people who launch entrepreneurial businesses are not successful. Because all of these things have to be in alignment at the right time. And then you have to recognize it and strike. So our infrastructure was not in place. We had a core group of personnel, and they were tremendous. They were in place. But we did not have the facilities. We did not have the computers, the telephone system. Those are the things that make me cringe. I've never had a problem investing in personnel. The rewards I have gotten by investing in people have been astronomical. I hate investing in technology because 6 months later, it's obsolete. The computers no longer can run the new software programs. Oh, it would kill me because we were living dime to dime. And still to this day, we're not living dime to dime, but a lot of people believe in infrastructure, and when they talk about it, they talk about equipment, facilities, computers. I talk about people. And maybe it's because we are in the people business. But I think all business is about people. You have challenges with personnel, and you cannot be delusional. Those people who help start the company with you, and if you have been successful and you've grown the company, sometimes they do not grow as rapidly with you. They help build you, but to get to another level, then you have operational challenges because you have to start recruiting and bringing in personnel from outside your organization. And I very much rather promote organically, which means our own people, give them the opportunities. And 19 out of 20 times I do that. But the 1 out of 20 times that I bring in someone from outside the organization, that's a challenge because I'm bringing in a heavyweight in a top leadership position. What I do is during the interview process, I make it grueling. I'm from Spanish ancestry, so I've been told that I put people through the Spanish Inquisition all over again. I just do not want a rotten apple disrupting our corporate culture. So as careful as I am as to what hotels I bring into the system, because I do not want a rotten hotel absorbing a disproportionate amount of my time, I'm even more careful what personnel come into our organization. And I still to this date, with 5,500 employees, handpick virtually every key personnel. And I've gotten to the point, and I'm sure I'm not perfect, but within 5 to 10 minutes, I know if there's a fit. And it's beyond what the resume shows, it's attitude. It's all about attitude. It's about the team rather than the individual. So after I bring that person into the organization, I make sure we groom them. We keep indoctrinating them into this corporate culture that we have tried to build up. A lot of organizations fail because they do not do what I just talked about now. And that's an exhaustive interview process. I get other people involved. I get other team leaders involved to make sure I do not miss anything. And it's amazing. Everyone has a different angle and approach. But that also gets everyone bought into bringing someone in. If you want people to accept a new leader in the company, you have to make sure that everyone buys into it. So make them part of the process. And then afterwards, continue to groom them. You cannot say, okay, you're hired and we know you know your job. Well, that's a given. Do you know our company? And with us, it's all about how you treat your personnel. The customer is not first in my business. I know that's the oldest cliche. The customer comes first. In my business, my team comes first. Because if I treat my team well, if I put a love on my team, and let me explain what that means. Today, I checked into our former Wyndham at the airport. I'm staying there tonight because tomorrow I have to catch a very early morning flight. I literally hugged and kissed just about everyone that I ran into, all of the employees. We hug and kiss in our company. I know you're not supposed to do that, but we do it. And you know what? We have never lost an EEOC complaint in 18 years. We have 5,500 employees now, and of course at different times we've had a different number of people. But you would think with all the hugging and kissing going on, someone's going to claim he was touching, he was sexual harassing. We do not have that in our company. And I think Southwest Airlines stole it from us. Because they just have better advertising dollars. We put a love on our people. Well, we've been doing that for a long time. So if we take care of our people, that's our corporate culture, quite honestly. Take good care of your people, promote from within, give people opportunities that help get you there, then they're going to take good care of the guest. It's a natural occurrence because they're happy. Or as one of my friends, who's also one of our team leaders, says, they drank the Kool-Aid. In other words, they believe. And in this room, as Saul said, I'm blessed to have a lot of the people that work with me. A lot of my team leaders are here. And so they've heard a lot of this before. And they're even more exuberant about it than I am. We've also recruited a lot of former Disney personnel. They're tough. The Disney personnel are tough because they're too happy. No one should be that happy. I wonder if they're on drugs. They come to work, how are you? I say, oh my God, give me time to wake up. Drink coffee, but these people are rah-rah, and they're disillusioned with Disney because Disney no longer operates that way. So I've stolen a lot of their people because I love that culture, that attitude. They do whatever it takes, and they do it with a smile. They're role players, and it's all about the team. So once again, I digressed a little bit, but I wanted to spend some time talking about a company's culture being very important as a launching pad for growth. And yes, every company is going to have a different culture, a different mentality. Microsoft does, Yahoo does, all of these high-tech companies do, and there's not one formula. But you need your company to have a definitive culture in order for it to be successful. I have very deep concerns about modern corporations, today's corporations, because they discard people right and left. Well, we're laying off 1,000 today. We're laying off 100 today. We're laying off 50. Before we lay off one person, you would not believe the emotional trauma we go through. How can you discard people? Because people are there representing their families. So are you going to discard their children? What happens to their rent? What happens to their food, their utilities? And most of the people in my industry do not make a lot of money. They're living check to check. After 9/11, it would have been very easy for me to lay off literally a couple thousand people, the way every other hotel company was doing. Why? Occupancy was down to 13%. No one was traveling. If you all remember, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, our country was paralyzed. We had never been attacked on our soil. And our industry, everyone talked about the airline industry going bankrupt. Well, we're one step removed from the airline industry, because if people are not getting on planes, then they're not coming to our hotels except for the drive-to markets. I made a decision at that time that we were not going to be like other companies. So I got together with our team, our leadership, at all the hotels, and I put it to them bluntly. I said, the revenues are not there. Most companies, as you know, are laying off people right and left. Everyone had a scared look on their face. I could feel that they thought, oh my God, I know what's coming. Then I surprised them. I said, I need you to help me solve this problem. Our revenues are not there. People are not traveling. What do? Here are our options as far as I see it. We lay off 40% of you. We cut back everyone's hours and do not lay off anyone. We cross-train people. That way, a front desk clerk is also a bowman and a room service attendant. Do multiple jobs. We cut back benefits. What do you want to do? The consensus at every hotel was lay off no one. We all work less hours, work different jobs, cut back our benefits. That's what we did. I invested in my people. That was not enough during those 2 years after 9/11. I personally lost millions of dollars keeping our people employed. I never looked at it as a loss because I invested in my talent. I invested in the hope that when times were good, they would be loyal, dedicated, and they would stay with me. That investment paid off, whereas the investment in technology does not pay off. That investment paid off in spades, because then when our tide rose again, I had the infrastructure and the corporate culture, true believers, to take this company to another level. That was one of the smartest decisions I made in my career, losing millions of dollars from 2001 to 2003. Because today, we have been able to execute. Last year, we acquired $700 million worth of hotels in the US and in Mexico. And we're very excited. Next week, we'll be acquiring our first 2 hotels in Alicante, Spain. So now we're going across the ocean, back to the homeland. By the way, I do not get too romantic about my Spanish heritage. I'm very proud of it, but I know the truth. They left my people here. They went back to Spain, and they left us here. So I'm very proud to be an American. Spanish American, but an American. Back to infrastructure and corporate culture. Because of how we treat our people, because we put our people first, our employees, our team members, team leaders first, because they know they can depend on us through thick and thin, good times and in bad, not only have we been able to grow the company, but we have the lowest annual employee turnover rate in the entire nation of any hotel company. The average turnover rate is 38% annually in this hotel business. That's huge. And I know it's skewed because you have part-timers, because they're college students or temporary workers. So the number's not as devastating as it sounds. But our turnover rate at American Property Management Corp is less than half that every year. It's 16%. We have one of the lowest worker comp rates in the country. That benefits all of my partners because we're paying less on workers' comp insurance. We embarrass people when they get hurt. And people do get hurt, and they're legitimate. But here's what we do. The general manager at every hotel has a directive. If someone gets hurt, you stop whatever you're doing. You go to that housekeeper, that dishwasher, whoever got injured on the job, slip and fall, whatever it may be, and you personally take them to the hospital or to the doctor. You stay with them, and then you take them home. By the time that process is over, the employee is like, leave me alone, I'm okay, I can go back to work. Most companies are so indifferent and hostile to employees that get hurt. And employees get angry and they get even. What do? They stay home. They collect workers' comp benefits for a week, 2 weeks at a time. When you do not take good care of your employees, they'll get even. That's one of the ways. Theft is another way. Treating the guest badly is another way. Not going to work happy, positive, is another way. So these are simple business philosophies in maintaining a corporate culture. Treat your people well. And as I mentioned before, we've never lost an EEOC complaint in 18 years. So now I've gone over a lot of the dynamics and challenges in growing a company. I've not gone through the competitive environment. This is another dynamic. I really think my upbringing as a New Mexican has been very vital to my actions and to any success we've had. Because in New Mexico, you're used to making do. You're used to fighting for every little thing. And when you grow up in an impoverished community like Las Vegas, you grow up tough. As many of you Las Vegans know that are in this audience, you grow up really tough. And you do not take crap from anyone. That famous attorney, Jerry Spence, who filed a lot of those class action lawsuits and brought corporations to their knees, he wrote a book. And in that book, he said the toughest town in the United States is Las Vegas, New Mexico. And he said he hopes to never go back. I took a lot of pride in that. So I'm fiercely competitive. My personnel are fiercely competitive. And we do not take anything from anyone. And at times when I've spoken to different University of New Mexico groups of students, graduating students or students in the business school, I always try to impart on them, be fierce, be tough. You're going to have to be better than everyone else. You're going to have to work harder. What drives me now is the same thing that drove me from the beginning. Coming from Las Vegas, New Mexico, and in Santa Fe, I went to high school there and spent so much time working there. They're just as tough too. They're a little more sophisticated about how they're tough, but they're just as tough. So coming from northern New Mexico, I have a very serious chip on my shoulder. I always have something to prove. I will never be satisfied. I have this tattoo, this imprint, where I think I need to be better than the next guy every darn time. Here's who I compete against. I compete against guys and deal with right now graduates from Harvard Business School, the Wharton School of Management, Cornell, the best college, hotel college in the country, in the world actually. Cornell is past Lausanne, Switzerland. And the list goes on. And I compete against guys that went to Andover, Phillips Exeter, all the privileged academies and preparatory schools. And I'm keenly aware of that every time because I'm really living in their world. Because the bankers, the opportunity funds, the institutional funds, the pension funds, they're all run by people from the Ivy League schools, the Wharton School, Stanford, Berkeley. They're all run by students who, for the most part, had a privileged background. And they network in a very powerful way. So this has been an obstacle in growing the company. Because when you graduate from Cornell, they're called Cornellians. You would not believe how they scratch each other's back and take care of each other. I'd love to see that happening out of the University of New Mexico, where when someone gets a resume and it says the University of New Mexico, you immediately get that resume and put it to the top. That's what they do. Make no mistake about it. And a lot of times they're not even submitting resumes, they're making phone calls to guys they know in different positions. That's the world I compete against. And I love doing it because of this chip on my shoulder. I'm a feisty, tough, mean public school graduate from New Mexico. I'm a Lobo. All of these things are huge challenges. Market conditions, infrastructure, talent, cash, banking relationship, all aligning at once. I'm not sure which is more of a challenge because they're all important. But what I see as the biggest challenge we have coming from New Mexico is the last thing I spoke about. And that's the networking that the other colleges do. I still have my home in Albuquerque, a lot of businesses in New Mexico, but I live in San Diego. And so I'm keenly aware of another mafia in California and in real estate, USC. The USC Mafia. They're like the Cornellians, the Trojans. Oh my God. All the top guys at GE, Prudential. The East Coast is dominated by Harvard, Wharton, Princeton, Yale. The West Coast, it's dominated by USC real estate grads. And they're all looking out for each other. They're all taking care of each other. It's that network that's powerful that somehow or another we need to establish here in New Mexico. We have 45 hotels at this time. We buy, we sell, we, for the most part, are gatherers, and we keep. I'm very proud to say that 39 of those 45 hotels are managed by New Mexicans. Thank you. 70% of my entire leadership in the company is New Mexican. I am singly responsible for any population decreases in New Mexico. Because I'm shipping them everywhere. A couple of articles have been written about me and our company, and in one line, I remember this reporter quoting an industry expert who says, Gallegos always appoints to key leadership positions people he trusts. That's part of his success. He's absolutely right. And I just tend to trust New Mexicans. So I practice what I preach. A good example of it, and I've asked her mom for forgiveness because her mom's here now to ask me why I'm doing this, to her daughter. But Patricia Tenorio grew up with me in Las Vegas and was one of my early supporters every time I ran for student body president or class president. And she's one of my hotel leaders. She's just been promoted to the general manager position in Canton, Ohio. And now her mother, Mary, is here. And I have to see her and explain why I'm sending her daughter to Canton, Ohio. And then her sister Barbara's here too, and she wants to know why her sister has to go so far away. I understand it. We're very family-oriented in New Mexico, but I need someone I can trust. It's far away. We have a hard time monitoring that hotel from San Diego. But I know I can trust Patricia without fail. She'd never take a penny from me or the company, and she'll beat up anyone who does. So, we may not have that connection that I've talked about that the other universities, the prestigious universities have, but it has to start somewhere. And I'm very proud that so many of our leaders are New Mexicans, but it's all part of that corporate culture. And I guess because my job now as the CEO is really to grow the business, I deal almost exclusively now in transactions, banker relationships, partner relationships. We've grown because we've been backed by friends and family initially, and then by institutions like GE Capital, Merrill Lynch, Prudential, ING, the big Dutch bank. We now have our own private equity fund of $400 million to buy hotels. And guess who my investors are? Very prestigious university foundations. Yale, Harvard, Columbia, Princeton, Dartmouth, Cornell. They have billions of dollars in their foundations, and they like investing in successful companies with track records and with underlying asset protection of real estate. The University of Texas is one of my investors. And then we have state pension funds. State of New York, State of Texas, State of Idaho. Go Idaho, I'm not sure how they got in there, but they did. And CalSTRS, California State Employee Retirement Fund. They're the little brother to CalPERS. CalPERS has around $170 billion in their pension fund. Huge numbers. CalPERS probably only has $110 billion. I've had to get used to these big numbers. Coming from New Mexico, we do not have numbers like that. But finally, I made it easy for myself. You just add zeros. It's not so complicated. So it's neat that those people, those funds are now investing in a public school graduate who's not one of them. But it's been very difficult to crack that barrier. And the only way we cracked it is they could not deny our success, the success of a company built by New Mexicans. So that spoke volumes. So now I bring this to a point where I'm faced with my next serious challenge. Where do we take the company now? What's our next level of growth? How do I return capital to all of these investors? I have to go public at some point. That way everyone gets stock, and they can cash their stock when they see that the right tax advantage is there for them. I may be putting myself out of a job. And this is the dilemma that a lot of CEOs face. First of all, I'm not really doing what I most enjoyed in the first place, and that was operating hotels, actually running them, getting involved with the GMs, the department heads, and really calling the shots at the hotels. I trust so many talented people to do that now. So in a way, I've evolved, and now I deal with bankers, partners, investors, and opportunities. Now I might even put myself out of that job. Because when we go public, we're going to have access to even more money. And what are these big investors going to say? I've seen it before, and I'm not being delusional. They're going to be running a $1 billion annual revenue company. So that's another challenge of growing a company. A lot of CEOs put themselves out of a job. But I have a contingency plan. Because honestly, I'm not sure how successful I'm going to be in running a public company. I'm a New Mexican. I'm a northern New Mexican. And I cannot stand the thought of a scrawny 24-year-old analyst, 23-year-old analyst, fresh out of Harvard, questioning what I'm doing. And this happens. It's life. So I hope I can control my temper and this chip on my shoulder. But my contingency plan is I created 2 different portfolios. The first company is American Property Management Company. That's the battleship. That will always be private. It will always be our company. This new fund, I've used and created another company, American Property Hospitality Management. And that's the company we will take public. And I'm sure I'll have to sign up to run that company for 6 months to 2 years, probably 2 years. And then we'll see if my board of directors, now I'll have to answer to a board of directors, will tolerate me. Or if I hit the wrong cycle, they'll think that I no longer have the skills because we hit a down cycle. But if I leave or if they chase me out of that company, I go back to American Property Management Corp, which is still in existence, still thriving, and I plan to run that company until I'm dead. So why go through all of this to grow a company? For the small business people that may be in the audience who have aspirations, ambitions to grow a company, I do want you to ask that question, because I shared with you my story, and I bet it's not so unusual. I bet all of these elements that have to be in alignment in your company as well. But you do need to ask yourself, why go through all of this just to put yourself out of a job? Well, yes, you make money, but you may have to leave the company you dearly love, and it's the people. In my case, the answer is, why grow a company? I cannot help myself. I've been this way, I've been ambitious since I was a boy. I'm not going to change. I'm never satisfied. And I'm a proud graduate of Paul D. Henry Elementary School in Las Vegas, Memorial Middle School, St. Michael's High School, and the University of New Mexico. I still have something to prove. I have to prove that I can compete in an international level, a national level, against the best and beat them with New Mexicans. So it's in a way a sickness. It's a chip on your shoulder that you just cannot get rid of. And those of you who are from Las Vegas, Santa Fe, northern New Mexico, you know what I'm talking about. You're edgy, you're tough, you're mean. And once you tasted some success, you want more. So I cannot help myself. But for those of you who do not have this sickness and who do not have this chip on their shoulder and always feel they have to prove something, ask yourself whether or not you want to grow your company and go through all of this to go full circle. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Most of all, thank you for your support, because so many of you are part of what I and we have done. And without you, I could not have done it. This has never been a one-man show. It's always been a team. When I was selected National Entrepreneur of the Year in 2004, I was embarrassed, because I surrounded myself with all these people who were more talented, smarter, taller, and better looking than I was. And yet I got all the credit. And I was in shock that I was selected, because most of the time, people in their late 60s, 70s, and even their 80s got selected for that honor as the pinnacle of their career. What I did the next morning is I went to this booth that they had, and I bought every cap, every shirt, I cleaned them out. Every pin, every plaque that said Team Member, National Entrepreneur of the Year 2004. And I gave all of those jackets, caps, hats to my team. That's the only way I could accept it. Because once again, I'm this little boy who grew up in a large family, and it was one for all for one. So that's my story. Thank you.
So we'd like to take a minute to do some Q&A. I just want to remind you that we do have a survey on your seat, and if you could just take a minute at the conclusion of this to do that, that would help us going forward. Saul?
First of all, I think this is hilarious. And here's why. Because since I was always working, even in high school, since junior high, high school, college, I never made good grades. And so I want to make good grades for once. I was a terrible student. I was lucky this fine university graduated me.
We have the microphone here if anybody would like to ask a question.
Yes, sir.
What's your strategy for determining which hotels you'll go after, what markets, what are the things you're looking for when you choose a location?
That's a good question, because it's so complicated. What we're doing now is we're focused on major markets, secondary markets. Now let me define those. Major markets are New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Miami, Chicago, Mexico City, Cancun. Secondary markets are Denver, Phoenix, San Antonio, Dallas. Albuquerque, we're called a tertiary market, third-tier market. So our strategy, because I have so much institutional funds behind me, I need to focus on the very high-end, very expensive 4- and 5-star hotels in major markets, secondary markets, and prominent resort locations. That has not stopped me from reinvesting in Albuquerque, because in the last few years, we bought the Radisson. We poured $22 million into it. We're building this water park. The old Four Seasons, it's going to come alive. It's already pretty. Wait until that water park's open. We bought the DoubleTree downtown. We just finished renovating it, and the New York firm that owned it never put a penny into it. You should see it now. It is gorgeous. And we recently bought the Wyndham at the airport, and we're going to renovate that and position that as a 4-star hotel as well. So other than Albuquerque, we're very focused on these major markets. Why? Not just because institutional funds want institutional assets, it's because they hold up the best. And they're the most liquid to trade. It's pretty easy to sell an asset in San Francisco, San Diego, etc., where it's a lot more difficult to sell an asset in Canton. So Patricia could be there a while. Mama. Any other questions?
Mr. Gallegos, what was your strategy to accumulate the cash?
Not spend. You would not believe the car I was driving in the early days. When I would go see a banker, when I'd go see Michelle, I'd park my car like half a block down the street because it was not a good representation. And so much of what you do is show. And I was afraid if I showed the banker this horrible car I was driving, that they would think I'm not successful. You remember, I learned in the parking lot, you have to dress for success in order to advance. And so we just lived very humbly for years and years and years. We did not increase our standard of living. Our big day came when my partner and I got matching Ford Tauruses. That was with air conditioning. That was big. And it's hard to do because you have sacrificed for so long that once you get some success, you want to increase your standard of living. You want a better home, you want better clothes, you want to take a vacation, and you want a better car. During the early days, I cannot tell you how many girlfriends I lost because I would not take them out to dinner. And then if I did in that old beat-up car, they never thought I was going to be successful. So.
Mr. Gallegos, can you comment on your reading habits, both kind of the variety of things you read and how much?
Good question. I read, when I get to the office, every trade publication I can get my hands on. I need to know what's going on in my industry. I used to be able to devour U.S. News and World Report, the New Yorker, New York Times, and now I'm so focused on all these hotel-related trade papers and magazines. In the morning, I barely get through the sports section before my daughters wake up, and they never stop talking. And so I'm having breakfast with them, and I just give it up and listen to them. So I get through half of the San Diego Union Tribune, and then I get online to see what's going on in New Mexico. So I'm glad for online. So it's really a splattering of everything. I have a stack of Newsweeks stacked up. So I cannot remember the last time I read a book. I can, and I read it twice. It's my favorite book recently, and that was by Tom Brokaw, The Greatest Generation. I love that generation. I love that book, and I love that generation because of their sacrifice for this country. They survived the tail end of World War I. They survived the Great Depression, the banking collapse, World War II. They knew about sacrifice. And I think so many people have, especially this generation, has no concept of sacrifice for this country and how this country got to be so great. So I love Tom Brokaw's book. So I read that twice a few years ago, gave it to my father-in-law because I thought he would enjoy it as well.
Question here, and then we'll go back there.
Yeah, it's very common, I think, to have ownership of hotels separate from the management of those hotels. How did your organization do that. It sounds from what you're saying that you manage the hotels you buy.
That's correct. We're a little different from the trend in the industry. The big hotel companies like Marriott, Hilton, Starwood, Host, they're selling off assets and retaining franchises and management because they like that fee income, which is cleaner and less risky than the real estate component. We have focused our business on owning and operating. We do very little third-party management. And quite honestly, we think we're very talented, very good at what we do, and we'd rather make money for ourselves than do third-party management contracts and divert our attention or resources. I'd rather send, I keep picking on her, Patricia, to one of my hotels than to a third-party hotel. I'm very honest about it. I want her to make money for me and for my partners.
45 hotels must really test your span of control. Can you comment upon how you can keep control of such a wide, diverse empire?
I only now focus on problems that have liability. If there's a fire, if there's a slip and fall, at our hotel in Tallahassee a couple of years ago, there was this guest. He was a bully. We have some guests that sometimes are not so nice. And he kept poking his hand into the chest of our front desk manager, chewing him out. He was mad about something. Front desk manager asked him to stop it several times. He would not stop it. He kept belittling him, pounding on his chest. Finally, my front desk manager, God bless him, he did the wrong thing. He climbed over the front desk and beat the heck out of that guest. So I get called immediately saying, John just beat the heck out of a guest. I said, why did John do that? And they tell the story, and I say, God, I've been there because I used to be a front desk manager, and I remember that guest. But I had to fire John. And then we countersued the guest for assaulting our employee. We did not lose that suit. So I get calls anytime there are those types of incidents. People go to hotels to commit suicide. It's sad. The women, I get those calls. The women who go to hotels to commit suicide, they'll do it in the tub, or they'll put plastic all over the beds and all over the carpet. They do not want their families finding them. My poor maids, my poor housekeepers, they walk in. We see it all in the hotel business. I probably should not have shared that story. It's such a dimmer on the evening, but I get those calls because I want to make sure they're handled correctly. I focus on acquisitions. I focus on meetings with lenders, meetings with partners, and I just trust a lot of talented people that we've trained, we've groomed, and we believe in to handle the rest. I had to let go. And being an entrepreneur, that's one of the toughest challenges you have. You have to let go. That's why you have to have people around you trust that you know are capable.
Go ahead.
Who is your toughest competitor, and why are they your toughest competitor?
I'm going to say this nicely. I do not like HEI. A lot of you have never heard of HEI. Cornell graduates, they've always had all the money from all the institutions. They outbid me even today, every darn time I compete against them, because they have all the money. HEI has their own private equity fund. They just got another $400 million, so now they're flush with around $600 million. And every time I think I have a hotel won, HEI comes in and ups the price 5 million, 3 million, 8 million. And I'm too disciplined. I'll let it go because I think it becomes marginal at that point. And so HEI is my toughest competitor. They're flush with cash. They have a very decent organization. And they're all Cornellians. So they're all very smart guys. Wish I could compete against them on a level playing field.
Jim Collins was in town just 2 weeks ago to promote his book, Good to Great. And I suspect a lot of folks in this room had an opportunity to hear Jim. And one of the basic fundamentals of Jim's thinking is about, sort of validates what you said, which is about who's on the bus. And so I'm wondering if you've got a chance to read his book, Good to Great, and whether some of what you've adopted as part of your corporate culture has any relationship with it.
Unfortunately, back to your question, I've not had a chance to read his book, and I'm not familiar with it. I'm really remiss in not being able to read as many books as I'd like. Early in the morning, I wake up at 4:30 to 5 every morning, and my fax machine has been humming. I get all my daily reports from every hotel, and I'm reviewing how we did the night before. So I do that for the first hour and a half before I start in on preparing breakfast. So I'm reading too much hotel stuff.
He will validate a lot of what you were saying, which is invest in the people and then determine your direction.
Thank God, because that's contrary to so many. And he's from Stanford. A lot of good people come from Stanford. I have family members that graduated from Stanford. I'm very proud of them. I'm just glad to hear that because so many corporations do not have that attitude. And you know what? It sets us apart. That does give me a competitive edge against guys like HEI. I think I have a much more loyal, dedicated group of people than they'll ever have.
One last question. Go ahead.
Mr. Gallegos, you mentioned earlier some great nuggets I think about your first properties you purchased and the great returns you made on them. It sounds like to me you kind of have the philosophy of making money when you buy or buying them right. Do you continue to try to incorporate that philosophy in acquiring, for instance, the $700 million worth of assets last year? Is that a tough thing to keep discipline and follow?
It is. We made most of our money on the C-class assets, the Comfort Inns, the small Radissons, the Days Inns. You know, a B asset would be going up the food chain like a DoubleTree. But now, because of where most of my money comes from, I have to focus on the A-class assets, the really nice Hiltons, the nice Sheratons, the nice Le Meridians, Westins. So I've had to abandon that philosophy and get the institutional grade assets, and those do not come cheap, and they're a little more challenging to make money on them. But that's the direction I've had to take the company. What I'd like to do now is ask for your indulgence. I'd like all of my current and former team members, my team, to stand up. Mr. Silva, I see you. Please stand up. There's Chris. I'd like to thank all of these tremendously talented people. The next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to ask all of my family members. And by the way, when we get together for Christmas, there are 99 of us now. We have our own tribe. So I'd like to have all of my family members stand up, even if you already stood up because you're working with the family company. So I'd like all my family members to stand up. Thank you for being here. And that was a quiz. I'm a little sore at the team members who did not stand up when I asked my family members to stand up, because they're all supposed to be family.
You don't have a chance.
I'd like my former classmates to stand up, because I have some good friends in the audience that were classmates with me. Thank you for being here. I did not see Annette. And I'd like my former teachers, administrators from the University of New Mexico who invested in me and who believed in me to stand up, because there are some of those in the audience as well. Ralph? And I'm finally going to acknowledge my good friend, and when I was student body president, he was my vice president. He was very loyal and dedicated to me, and I've always been loyal and dedicated to him as well. Dan Serrano, he's in the background. Hi, Dan.
Michael, on behalf of the University of New Mexico, the Anderson School, I'd like to present you with something that we hope you will be wearing when you meet those Cornellians next time.
Thank you so much. Thank you again. Thank you.
Ernest asked me that we can show them what we're
Oh,
talking about.
wonderful.
You can't take development officer out of Ernest.
Ernest does a good job, too. All right. University of New Mexico, Anderson School of Management, works. There's more. I have my cherry and silver Lobo cup. You should see the Lobo stuff I have in my office. And, well,
Did you give him one without a
That was a trick box.
you know, I know we've had budget cuts, but you did not have to get my hopes up.
I'm sure he'll fix that.
It's part of being a New Mexican. We do with what we have.
Please help me thank Mr. Michael Gallegos.